The French press is one of my favourite ways to make coffee, but for years I struggled getting a consistent brew. Sometimes it was too bitter, too weak, sludgy, or it just didn't taste right. If you've ever had these problems, then you're not alone. Today I'm going to reveal the 7 biggest mistakes you might be making with your French press and how to fix them so you can get the perfect brew every time. Hi, I'm Lizzie and I'm all about helping you make better coffee at home. If that's something you want to learn more about, then hit the subscribe button. Several months ago, we made a video comparing 3 French press recipes. We looked at James Hoffmann's, Asa Christensen's and the classic. Since then, we've been doing some research and we found the top 7 mistakes people make when brewing in a French press. First up is the grind size. This is one of the most important. If your coffee grounds are too fine, they can pass through the mesh filter and make your coffee muddy and sludgy. On the other hand, if they're too coarse, you won't extract enough flavour. The ideal grind size for a French press is medium coarse, like this. This ensures a perfect balance and prevents any grounds from sneaking into your cup. If you do use pre-ground, make sure it's a coarse grind for French press, and also that you use it within a couple of weeks of opening. But I highly recommend using freshly ground whole bean coffee. It's going to give you a longer shelf life as it doesn't lose its flavour so much over time. Next, the water temperature. This is crucial. If your water is too hot, you'll over-extract and end up with bitter coffee. Too cold and it won't extract enough flavour. Aim for a water temperature between 195 and 201 Fahrenheit for dark roast, 202 to 205 for medium to light. An easy trick is to boil your water and let it sit for about 30 seconds before pouring. If you want to nerd out, you can get a fancy kettle with temperature control or use a meat thermometer to test the temperature. Just make sure it's clean. Now, let's talk about coffee freshness. Freshly roasted beans are key to a great cup of coffee. They release carbon dioxide, which also helps form a crust, which we'll touch on later in the video. Anywhere between 1 to 3 weeks of roasting is optimal, but if they're unopened and sealed in the packet, you should be good for a couple of months. Decent quality beans should have a little date that tells you the best before, but also when they were roasted. By the way, if you want to try some delicious coffee, we currently have 20% off your first subscription. Just use the code on the screen and the link in the description. Next up, the coffee to water ratio. This is another critical factor. Too much coffee can make your brew too strong and bitter, while too little can make it weak. The golden ratio is somewhere between 1 to 15 or 1 to 17. That's 1 part coffee to 15 to 17 parts water. You'll want to go with around 1 to 15 for a dark roast and 1 to 17 for a light roast. This is because more water is needed to extract light roasts. Most specialty roasters roast their coffee slightly lighter than commercial roasters, so we're going with a 1 to 16.5 ratio. This is the ratio set out by the SCA. They're a load of coffee nerds who have done some pretty thorough scientific research, so I'm going to take their word for it. Once you've measured it a few times, you can always eyeball it if you're in a rush, but definitely measure it the first few times to get a good idea. A top tip, you can either use the markings on your French press or put a piece of tape or a marker to remember for next time without having to weigh it. If you're changing the type of coffee you're using, you may want to measure again, and this is because different coffees have different densities, and also the size of the beans change, so that's going to affect the weight to volume ratio. Brewing time is just as important. 4 minutes is the sweet spot for steeping your coffee. Less than that and you'll have under-extracted coffee. More and it might turn bitter. Set a timer and let your coffee steep for 4 minutes for optimal extraction. After that, you can break the crust and watch the sediment and grounds fall to the bottom, leaving you with a beautifully clean cup of coffee. Which brings me on to my next point, agitation. At the first stage, some people like to bloom their coffee to release carbon dioxide before topping it up with a full amount of water. I personally think that this is only necessary for pour-over coffee, where moisture is needed for the extraction process to begin. In a French press, since your coffee is submerged anyway, I don't think it matters too much. If you disagree, let me know why in the comments. Once you've poured, stirring too much can break up that crust that forms on top, which affects the flavour. During the first stage, just leave it alone. Also, when you plunge, you want to make sure that you plunge slowly and leave a little gap before the mesh hits the coffee so you don't disrupt all of the sediment at the bottom, which you've been so patiently waiting for to settle. This also includes pouring. Gently tip the French press for best results. Lastly, water quality. The mineral content and pH of your water can affect the extraction process. hard water can alter the flavour, and too acidic or basic water can mess with your brew. Use filtered water for the best results. I hope these 7 tips have been useful and that you'll now be making better French press coffee. If you want to see our 3 favourite French press recipes, click here, and click this video here if you want to learn more about light roast versus dark roast and which you may prefer for your French press. Thanks for watching, I'll see you next time.